Anthropic, as far as I'm concerned, has the mandate of heaven.
These AIs are like encroaching on territory that has been uniquely human. This ability to think or have ideas.
I want one that really keeps me accountable, though. If I
Mm.
say I'm going to work on my side project on Sunday, I want it to
Yeah,
nudge me like at
yeah,
8:30
we
a.m.
don't have
Sunday morning. Hey, you haven't worked on this. I haven't seen you do one code commit for a week. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 2 of the Frontiers podcast. I'm Steve, based in New York, working in finance. I like healthcare and incentives. I'm joined by my co-host, John.
Hey everyone, technologist based in London, mostly focused on AI.
Awesome. And today we're talking about humanism, whether progress is inevitable, and why some very smart people think human extinction might be good, actually. So before we dive into Jason Crawford, I just want to, maybe hit on a few things that we've noticed in the past couple of weeks, and then we can kick it off. I don't know, John, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think the biggest talking point probably of the last week has been Sora, right? Or at least
Yeah.
that's the thing that's caught my attention. Well, Sora and also I don't know what they're calling it, apps or plugins. So ChatGPT now allows companies to integrate their particular applications within it. So it will call them directly, or when a user specifies actually which apps they want to use. So I think that's probably been a something that's been on the mind of OpenAI and Sam Altman for a long time. They tried plugins in the past. I don't know if they still remain popular. I don't think so. But I think they've always had that, or anybody really that's been around in the tech scene for the last 20 years and seen the domination of iOS and felt burnt by it, realizes the power of distribution and applications. And yeah, ChatGPT is their distribution has grown tremendously. Like the customer base, I don't know where it is now, but I'm sure it's way past the 100 million that they initially had. So now they've got that platform. Okay, it makes sense for them to try this, and yeah, I'm intrigued to see how it will turn out. Yeah, and especially how they'll manage kind of the dynamics between different companies offering the same kind of services, if they'll leave that to the user to only when the user asks and for specific companies, or if the user will get to choose which apps they integrate within their ChatGPT, or if there'll be adverts of some sort. I don't think they've figured out those kind of dynamics, but yeah, fascinating to see how that will pan out. And if other companies like Anthropic will also follow suit, if Google will follow suit with Gemini, and what will happen there. That's the first thing. Sora, we can come on to. But I don't know if you saw the news, what your reaction to that was.
Yeah, so I didn't go into detail on the integrations. Obviously, Sora caught my attention, which we can talk about in a second. Obviously, I've got my thinking hat on. I've got some
Yeah.
views on the matter, but with the integration piece, it makes sense why they're reaching to do this. I think for most folks, I mean, there's probably like three eventual outcomes for like the future of these like new frontier models, which is like at a
Mm.
pessimistic level, it's like this will level off and will never go anywhere and it's a bubble and it's all going to come crashing back to Earth. I
Mhm.
think that's one view of
Mhm.
the world. The second camp, which I would put myself into, is what I would call commoditization hell, which is that
Mm.
most of these frontier models will commoditize. They're not making any money. I think even at the gross profit level, they're not really, it's completely just a wrapper of NVIDIA and compute, and they're spending more on compute than they take in revenue. And will they ever get there? And one of the key obstacles is the lack of integration, right? Does it integrate with any existing workflows? If a radiologist, I don't know, is going to be better from AI and be able to look at more scans and do way more screenings and become more efficient due to AI, it has to integrate with their existing medical imaging system. They don't want to use like the ChatGPT chat window to like
Mm.
copy and paste people's radiology images into there.
Oh.
And the same with finance and law and every other profession, right? And so it's, is there some kind of integration at the last mile? That's going to be the ultimate question. If you just have a website and an app and you have no moat, right? Because brand loyalty is not going to keep someone using your frontier model for much longer. They're pretty commoditized. DeepSeek, Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, it's the same experience, right? So I guess you have to have that integration if you want to build a moat. So it's not surprising that they're moving towards that. I guess I'm not clear. Could you give a concrete example of what this would look like for the end user?
Sure. I think they have an example, a video on their website, but you can do things, for example, ask ChatGPT to fetch and play a song or list songs from Spotify. You can ask it to look up houses with Zillow, I think it is the application in the US, booking flights with Expedia. You have to specifically like and explicitly call out the company that you want to ask ChatGPT to use as a service. And that's all they showed us for now. I need to look further into it. But yeah, those are some of the requests that you can make. I guess previously I'm not sure. Yeah, previously I guess you could have asked ChatGPT to do a web search maybe, and it would have gone to find those particular domains and return some results. But these companies have built like bespoke integrations so ChatGPT can use the specific API that I guess they've defined
Mm,
to be able to more readily, more accurately fetch the information that it needs to support you as a user.
okay,
Um,
interesting. And then you know what I'm going to say, right? Because we talked about this last week a little bit. It's like, who is, if I'm the end user, who's the
mm,
fiduciary? Am I giving
mm,
Sam my money to find the cheapest flight, or
mm.
is Expedia giving Sam their money to show me a flight which might not be the
Yeah.
cheapest, but it's the one they
Yeah.
need to fill?
Good question. Not sure, and I'm not sure how that will play out. So I alluded to, we don't know how the marketplace for apps will turn out, and if users will, if control will remain in the user's hands, first of all, and like which applications are called, but then also like when you request specific data, what is going on behind the scenes there? Yeah, which is maybe what you're referencing. So yeah, these are really important questions. Back to your point, like though, are these language models commodities in some sense? I can see where you're coming from, and I think I agree. In terms of like their functionality, a lot of them perform very similar tasks. But I think we have seen that there's certain loyalty starting to be formed around the personalities of these applications, and the product people in those teams are very specific about like creating their LLMs to embody like a certain persona. Grok is very yeah, liberal, open-minded, doesn't shy away from any type of content. I think Claude I don't know what the distinction between Claude and OpenAI is. Maybe OpenAI is a bit more sterile in its responses, whereas Claude feels like it has a bit more of yeah, it's a bit more affable, really, and approachable. Whether that will make a difference long term, I don't know, but I've certainly chosen my applications and partly based on that, just the feeling, the interface, and the responses and how
Really?
they feel.
But when you're using it for
A little
what though?
bit.
What are you trying to do with it?
I do all sorts of things with it. You start out using it for one thing, and then slowly, as you learn what its other capabilities are, you continue to use it for those. So I don't know. With Claude at the moment, I ask it to do all sorts of things, whether that's just like analysis of documents or web search, or to act as my kind of thinking partner to code as well. Yeah, I only really turn to the other ones if I want like a second opinion. Yeah. So I've already formed like some kind of loyalty, but yeah, with Claude and not really in the market to change that unless there's
Yeah, but if they
some.
double the price, I don't know. It
Yeah.
depends on what you're using it for, right? If you're going to Claude for advice, which a surprising number of people, I think the time use surveys that we've seen on these
Mm,
frontier models is that end
mm,
consumers are using them a surprising proportion of the time they're using it for advice.
mm.
And then another portion of it is help me, yeah, find information on XYZ. So it's people satisfying their curiosities. So does the personality of the large language model create enough of a moat where
Yeah,
people won't switch, especially when prices do begin to stabilize and reach an equilibrium around the compute that's been built? It's an open question. It's interesting. I never thought about it like that.
maybe not. Also, up until now, often we're not really forming or sharing a lot of information with these language models. That itself could be a mode like whilst you transact with them and you give them information that they need in order to carry out the task that you have at hand, you're not really like uploading documents that will form like a memory bank that is personalized to you. You can do that now, and I'm curious to hear like how many people are doing that. But maybe over time, as you do share a lot more, whether that be images or videos or other documents and assets, and that you do end up creating like a second brain within these applications, will that also be, yeah, create some stickiness and yeah.
Hmm.
them people from switching over.
That's interesting. But this is just stuff that's going into the prompt window, right? So it's like you don't see it on the front end, but it's like being inserted somewhere into the prompt, like
Oh.
hidden, obscured from view. But that, because I know Anthropic has this setting, like when you download the Claude app on your computer, you can give it like notes and you can say up to, I think it's like 10,000 characters or whatever, like a list of bullets or, oh, when you talk to me, please always give me short responses, or please
Mhm.
always remember that I'm based in New York whenever you give me recommendations about restaurants or whatever it is. And then basically whenever I talk to Claude, then I say, "Oh, okay, it's Friday night. I'm looking to go here. My dad's visiting. Please give me some restaurants." And then what should we do during the day? And it automatically knows because I've given it this like notes. I filled that part out and tailored it, but this is just going to the prompt window. I just don't see it.
Yeah, yeah. For the time, yeah. At the moment, it's all like managing the prompt window and how do you bring in that information that the user shared in the past or now currently. Yeah, managing that.
Interesting. Interesting. No, it remains to be seen. I think, yeah, I guess moving on from the OpenAI integrations aspect, but looking at the
Mm,
OpenAI Sora, was it Sora 2?
mm.
I never saw Sora 1, so I'm just confused why it's called Sora 2. Maybe I'm missing
It
something.
was, but it wasn't like a standalone application.
Okay. So now they
Yeah.
have Sora 2, and this came out around the same time. So I think they launched it on September 30th. It all happened very quickly. I remember they launched this, and then it was either the day before or the day after I saw Alexander Wang launching Meta's version
Mm,
of something very similar, which is short form AI
mm,
generated content. And when they launched that, the original tweet that Alex Wong posted got ratioed heavily. A lot of quote tweets, a lot of people not liking it, just a really kind of mixed reaction by the public as proxied by the reaction on X. And there was a few posts that said something like, the plan is to turn your children and your grandparents into just drool slurping morons for this year-on-year subscription growth, but they need to make 500,000 videos of an elephant walking into a McDonald's in order to cure cancer. I don't know.
mm.
It's a bit weird to me because Sam's been saying forever, oh, we need more compute, we need more money, we need more compute, we need more compute. And then it's for what? And then the goal, I thought, and a lot of the optimists thought, oh, okay, of course it's to cure cancer and to do all these noble ends. And then now it seems, oh, no, the goal was always to make like short form generated slop
Mm.
that's, I would argue, not good for anybody. It's not only harmful, it's not only degrading to the human spirit, but it's actively harmful to developing brains, which are going to be the ones consuming a lot of this stuff. I don't know. It
There
just
a
made me
distinction
sad.
between Was there a distinction between Sora and is it Vibes? Meta or whatever Meta
Yeah,
application?
vibes. Yeah.
Yeah, did you notice a difference in like the
I think the
features?
only thing I took away from it was that the Sora launch was also coupled with they gave away Sam's avatar, or for some reason, a lot of the AI generated content I saw was like with Sam in the video. And a
Mm.
lot of it was like fake CCTV footage of security camera footage of Sam stealing things. So there's one where like he goes to Miyake's studio and steals like Spirited Away
Oh,
content, and then Miyake chases after him. And then there's another one where he's like at a Best Buy or an electronics store and he's stealing, I don't know, a semiconductor, and they're chasing after him. It's just you can obviously see where this goes wrong, right? You can obviously see why this is not great. And then a lot of the content that I saw from Vibes was just pure slop. There was all the memes of, oh, finally we did it. Pure slop. I don't
mm.
know where this is good. There's like duck races, like races of ducks, and just absolute nonsense. Like, I didn't get it.
There was, I think actually, both of those they are quite similar apps, and yeah, even with Meta's one, it's still creators or people that are making those videos or prompting those videos. It's not yet a Meta like programmatically creating those videos for you based on like what it knows about you. Although that might be a future that's in like Zuck's mind, we wouldn't run them past him. Unfortunately, that's a reputation that they have as a company, and he has as an individual. I think the only real big difference, or the difference that was highlighted by the public, was this like feature to be able to use your own face or character in the videos that you create with Sora. And I think that turned it from like this slop engine into something that is a bit more social, a bit more fun and entertainment. It's like I'm putting myself in all of these different settings and environments and maybe doing silly things still but it felt, yeah, because it was an actual person within those
Mm.
settings, there was something to relate to. And if you share it with your friends, look what I made myself do, or you give me permission to use your face, and then I put you in a funny scenario. Obviously, there's danger for creating all sorts of garbage content for sure. And
What could go wrong?
yeah, it's the fine line that you tread when you make generative media available to all sorts of people. But that seems to have perhaps changed the perception of Sora. If it didn't launch with that feature, I think they would have probably like fallen into the same camp as like Meta. And it seems so far that Sora's blowing up quite a lot, like huge number of downloads. I can't really try it here in England yet.
Oh
I
no?
don't think
Is it banned there?
I don't think it's made it onto the App Store.
Oh, okay.
When I looked for it anyway, I couldn't find it. Maybe that will be changed soon. But yeah, and I was also listening to OpenAI, like Sam Altman with Ben Thompson from Stratechery. Yeah, and I think that was the point that was highlighted, really. Just this idea of being able to recreate images, create new content with yourself. Yeah, shifted from dystopian and slop into something a bit more fun and quirky and creative.
Maybe.
It's, yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's good. I don't know. I saw too many videos of Sam's head in a
Yeah.
toilet to feel
Yeah.
optimistic about it, but maybe I'm being too cynical.
I don't think we're not going to eradicate entertainment. Like entertainment is always going to be a huge industry. And you could argue that all entertainment is slop, really. What does it really do for us? Watching TV, watching Netflix on demand, it just turns people into mindless zombies. Now you have content which is it's not really on demand, it's just generated. I guess the difference. Yeah, not sure. I guess the point I'm making is like these things are always going to exist in some form or another. If we can avoid like all the ethical issues, which maybe we won't, and just continue to create fun and social apps, I think that's okay. But we still need, I guess, to teach individuals like how to manage their time. There's always going to be, yeah, I don't know where I'm going with this. I guess I'm like, entertainment is not going to be an industry that gets like shut down at any point in the future. So, yeah,
Yeah, that's fair.
we'll edit that part out.
That's fair. Look, I think, yeah, I think it's we've fallen pretty far from the days of has there always been low form of entertainment? Sure. We used to have blood sports for most of human history. People would get together and watch. Gladiators is probably a more aestheticized example, but they watched people like gander pulling. There were blood sports, which I guess you could say is a very low form of entertainment with no real value and probably bad. It's probably not good. But there's also the opera. There's also, I don't know, like play the Greek tragedies and plays that people would gather to see. And I feel like there is cultural value in that. And I think it's very hard for anyone to argue that there's cultural value. There's not going to be scholars, I hope, at venerated institutions in 1,000 years from now studying these AI short form videos. I think it's just we've distilled there used to be a narrative arc, rising action, falling action, tension, themes, motifs, messages, character development. There was some cerebralness to it, and now it's just like pure stimulation. It's just stimulating constantly, and I
Yeah,
don't know. Is there any real? I don't
yeah.
know. Yeah, it's strange to me.
There is like a small industry maybe popping around up, especially like coming from China around like micro dramas where they create like an entire drama, but it's all short form content built up via short form content, which is maybe 1 or 2 minutes at most. And it might have 100 or 200 videos like compiled together to create like a drama. Yeah, I guess they're still getting that character development and all of that sort of thing, but the format is changing quite a bit. But definitely by your point around like a lot of the content that we have now with shorts is just, yeah, pure, most of it is pure garbage and pure, yeah, stimulation.
Yeah. So that brings me to the next development, and that kind of brings us round circle to the hat. And then I want to get to Jason Crawford, but like the thinking campaign is absolutely brilliant, right? So it was, what was it, beginning of October, so almost 2 weeks ago now, Anthropic opened this pop-up store in the West Village here in New York City, and they gave out hats that said thinking on them, which of course goes with their thinking ad campaign, which if anyone hasn't seen that, they should watch the AI Sora launch video, watch the Vibes launch video by Meta, and then watch the Keep Thinking ad campaign by Anthropic. And then you tell me who has the mandate of heaven, okay? It's like the ad campaign, not only does it have this like MF Doom soundtrack and it's like super inspiring and like these beautiful like vignettes and almost like the cinematic quality, the aesthetics are perfect. The ad
Mm.
campaign positions Claude as a companion for ambitious thinkers pursuing scientific discoveries, artistic endeavors. I got my hat. I didn't realize people were going to line up around the block. I got there on Friday, and then I learned the whole weekend is just huge queues, a block and a half long. People flew in from other states. I saw on X. But and it's funny because when they launched it, I think one of the guys from Anthropic had tweeted, he's "Good morning, New York City. Come do your best thinking at our thinking space in the West Village." And then he dropped this line, which I really loved. He said, "Say no to slop." And
Mm,
so obviously this is a reaction, and maybe they timed it. I don't know. It was perfectly done.
yeah.
Obviously, this is a reaction against
Was it
the
the next day? Were they?
yeah, it may have been the very next day. It was like the slopification of short form video and like this. There was just slop exhaustion in the market, exacerbated by these recently announced apps. The execution of the campaign, the aesthetics of the campaign was just perfect, just absolutely perfect. I don't agree with everything Dario says, right? And he's got some really harsh words for like open source versus closed source, which I don't agree with at all. But they absolutely nailed this campaign. It was tasteful, it was thoughtful. If there is a future for AI, I hope it's closer to Dario's vision than the dystopian slop that Sam or Zuck is offering. And so, Anthropic, as far as I'm concerned, has the mandate of heaven. It struck a chord with a lot of people, right? Slop exhaustion is real. And then they gave us a copy of Dario's manifesto called
Nice.
Machines of Loving Grace. And what I loved about this was the very first chapter was about the different applications, the amazing things people would use AI for. Very first
Mm,
chapter is about biology. Yeah, right here. Chapter one, biology and health.
yeah,
It
wow.
was just perfect. I don't know. It was just something so beautiful and poetic about it. So very well done to the Anthropic team. Like really perfect
Um,
campaign. I've never seen that much enthusiasm and excitement around like a tech product since the Apple times. Seeing people line up around the block for a hat and a coffee. It was a little bright
Very
spot of optimism.
extremely jealous that I couldn't be there. Do you think it builds on Apple's Think Different campaign back in the day,
I
or
think
it's
so. Yeah, it was they had another big billboard where it was like I think it was on the New York City subway where it was like keep thinking and it
mm,
shows just someone sitting on like a step just like deep in thought and then it has the Claude logo. Just really simple, right? Keep thinking.
mm,
Like we are the companion to help you think. It's
mm.
obviously a play on the Think Different campaign. Like it's obviously like almost to continue in the footsteps of Steve Jobs. It was perfect.
Curious why they didn't maybe choose other words, or if they thought over other words that they might choose in replacement for thinking. But for example, building or creating, or yeah, more active words.
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. Why is it thinking? Why? I guess because thinking encompasses building or creating, or they don't want to exclude anyone.
Starting point. Yeah, yeah, and maybe because maybe the fear is that these AIs are like encroaching on territory that has been uniquely human. This ability to think or have ideas and create new ideas. Intelligence, I guess, is something that's uniquely human. So this was saying we're not here to steal those capabilities. We want to amplify those capabilities. And that was also something actually that Jason brought up in the essays, which yeah, had me thinking quite a bit about man's position on like the evolutionary tree and what is special about man and where do we go, what comes next, and if we're special at all, if there are characteristics that are uniquely human. We can come on that to that a bit, but I would definitely like to, yeah, after this I'm going to go back and watch that video, the Keep Thinking campaign.
Oh,
It's
it
just
gets me
so
so
good.
pumped. I have to watch it every day now. I have to wake up, do my push-ups, and I have to watch that video, and it just gets me going.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'm trying to think if there have been any other ad campaigns recently or in the past that have captured that, what would you call that, instilled that sense of inspiration and captured the energy of desire to go beyond like an individual and build for humanity. I don't know.
So there was another montage video which was perfect, and I think it like perfectly captured the zeitgeist of today's generation of builders and creators, and it got a lot of noise in the startup, the EAC crowd online, which was made by Peter Levels. I think he did it like last year, back in November or December, towards the end of last year, and I loved the video. It was only like 2 minutes long, and
Mhm.
then Mark Andreessen had retweeted it. And I think Peter Level still has it up on his YouTube channel, and it's just like a montage of videos of Jensen Huang 20 years ago, Bill
Mm,
Gates, like back in the 80s or 90s, the moon landings. All it was just this montage of like creators and builders and scientists and artists, and it was just so perfect.
yeah.
And it's funny because this genre of video has now become like its own subgenre. And I think Kalshi, like the online betting platform,
Mm.
also released a video
Oh,
which
did
was
they?
similar. Yeah, it shows like a Freddie Mercury concert and I don't know, all of these symbols of progress and ingenuity. And I'm like, okay, you guys are like a betting platform.
Yeah.
To say that you're on par with, I don't know, like the Apollo 11 spacecraft program is pretty presumptuous, but
Big leap in imagination.
yeah, exactly. Like I know you just try to hand wavily put them next to each other, but they're not even close to the same thing. You're a vice merchant at worst, and like a market engine for pricing things efficiently at best. So I don't know if
Fascinating
that's
to think about. I don't know if that's because we're seeing more of those as examples because we're within we have an interest in technology and following technology companies, or if there really is like a growth in these types of homages to humanity and progress that has emerged recently as either a reaction to something or a desire, an innate desire that hasn't been expressed in a long time. The only other adverts that come to mind for me that really got me hyped were the Honda adverts of the past. They actually, one was like the Power of Dreams, where I don't know if you remember that or if you've seen that at all, where they have a man who steps out of his home in a cabin, essentially starts to sing, and like almost opera style singing, and jumps onto a variety of Honda vehicles and just continues to progress and adventure through the terrain, through different parts of the world, and continuously singing about dreams and the power of dreams. And I just thought that was like when I was a kid and I saw that, I was like, this is absolutely magical. And they released they released a recent one as well, which was also about just a similar type of advert as the one that you've described. Different people, like shots of Senna, who's like a Formula One legend, and other kind of sporting heroes talking about like how we as individuals can't be stopped. We'll keep in the face of adversity, pushing and progressing. I just thought Honda just like have had a couple of like standout ad campaigns. That's the only one.
wow, that's interesting. I had no idea. They make great cars as well, so I have a lot of respect for the Japanese automakers in that particular regard. So not surprising, perhaps. But okay, speaking of video homages to the brilliance of
Mm,
man is perhaps the perfect segue to
mm,
Jason Crawford's
mm,
Ode to Man chapter, which I thought was great. I'll give a quick summary of Crawford's argument at the beginning about what is humanism and I think how we've lost it. And then we can go just do a lightning round discussion. So, just to lay it out here, Crawford is basically so we're continuing on Roots of Progress, Jason Crawford's manifesto about how would you describe it, right? Like this philosophy of progress, as he puts it, right? So he's talking at the beginning of the chapter, what is humanism? Why have we lost humanism? So, humanism at its core is a philosophy which puts humanity at the center. Human life, flourishing, and achievement matters, and it's good. It's a good thing, right? So, he references Sophocles' Antigone: wonders are many, and none is more wonderful than man, right? So, mainstream in classical antiquity, humans are remarkable. The ability to reason and create is extraordinary, and we should celebrate this. But the mainstream mood today is exactly the opposite of that. People are genuinely arguing that human extinction might be good for the planet and arguing against the proliferation of humanity. They say that humans are a cancer on the earth and that the world would be better off without us. And there's some popular books about how the earth would recover if humans were to all go extinct tomorrow. And it's weirdly acceptable in many educated circles. There's this anti human sentiment, which is now a respectable intellectual position.
mm,
And I think what dovetails with that is this like anti natalist sentiment, this like anti fertility. I only want to have one or zero kids, and it's a morally just position to have no children because it's better for global warming and gets into this like degrowth perspective. I guess the one thing I wanted to get your reaction on, John, is like, when did this flip happen? Because I've heard these talking points in the last 5 years when I'm
mm.
at dinner parties or whatever it is, and you hear people say similar things. Oh, I don't want to have a lot of kids because it's bad for the environment. Is this just online doomerism, or is this actually just mainstream, or do I just live in a bubble?
Great question. I wouldn't know specifically like when that happened. I imagine it might have correlated with a lot of the rising awareness of damage to the environment as we became more familiar and aware of what humans have done over the last century or so, burning fossil fuels. And yeah, we realized that there is some irreversible damage, and we're also slow to change our ways about fixing some of the things that we can fix. For example, there have been tons and tons of discussions amongst national governments, but also like international organizations about doing more to suppress the effects of climate change and countless delays on actually committing to those, yeah, interventions and making national changes. And I think that's probably riled a lot of people. So I imagine, yeah, as we've learned more about climate change, like this sentiment has arisen, like in tandem with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Climate change is the one, like the one macro topic that evokes this out of people and has made this a respectable position. I think it's probably not as new as Crawford suggests. I think as early as the Malthusians and like Robert Malthus was predicting that the earth would be doomed to famine, that the
Yep.
earth was subject to incredible overpopulation. There was a lot of travelers and European explorers who had traveled to parts of the East and in India and saw this explosion in population and this dwindling amount of resources. And this has
Mhm.
been echoed. This sentiment, maybe people aren't consciously echoing Robert Malthus, but they echo a similar sentiment for the
Yep.
past century and a half, right? Which is that, oh, the world is overpopulated, there's too many people, and there's not enough resources, and those graphs are going in opposite directions, and we're doomed to failure. And of
Mm,
course, what's wrong with this is what's wrong with all of these arguments and why they're always wrong is that under they underestimate human ingenuity.
mm,
Robert Malthus was famously wrong in his prediction that we would die of mass famine because why? Because we had ammonia fertilizers and Fritz Haber and what's his name? Robert Bosch? Haber and Bosch? Two German chemists who figured out a way to synthesize chemical fertilizers, ammonia-based fertilizers from the air saved what is today a third of humanity from starvation. There's a beautiful book about this called The Alchemy of Air, which I recommend everyone read. But they're always wrong. They've been making these same predictions throughout history. It's wrong today. Yes, there's climate change, but just
mm.
as we caused it, we can probably also solve it. There's direct air capture. We're transitioning our energy grid. I don't know. It's the same tired arguments over and over again, which you hear. But I would push back a little bit on Crawford saying that this is new. I don't think it's new. Okay, so that's the first point, right? Is that
Maybe,
is
maybe just challenge like a word they use there, namely like calling these arguments wrong. I don't necessarily think they're wrong. I think what different people are proposing different solutions to a problem that is real. So the growing population is putting pressure and stress on humanity in the sense that we need to find ways to feed a growing population. We need to handle how does that growing population interact with the environment and live sustainably with our ecosystem. And that stress is constant as we continue to grow as a species, or if we continue to, yeah, have increasing number of children in our population grows, we will continually bump up against that wall. And I guess some of the people which are proposing solutions like stop progress, don't want to continue suffering with that or suffering, dealing with that stress, dealing with these sort of perhaps existential questions. They just want to remain in a comfort zone where we no longer have to think about how do we solve this problem or that problem. So anti-progress, because I guess it's more comfortable. We know how to deal with today's solutions. Let's not continuously keep our foot on the accelerator, on the gas, and keep pushing.
yeah.
But they are just one type of solution. They're, I guess, on the more pessimistic end of the spectrum, whereas the others on the more optimistic end of the spectrum are suggesting no, we shouldn't stop progress because progress is affording us all of these positive changes to the world. And instead of stopping, we should find ways to just solve a lot of the problems that we keep bumping up against. Yeah, let's not make that trade-off. Let's do both, basically. Let's progress and also keep solving problems at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was just my thoughts.
Yeah. I do wonder if you were to go back and tell the kind of overpopulation people of yesteryear. If you went back 100 years and you told the Malthusians, oh, yeah, by the way, the
Mm,
biggest problem that we're going to have in 2025 is that too many of us consume too many calories and that
mm,
obesity is a widespread problem, not just in the rich world, but across the developing world. They would be shocked. They would be like, there's just no way. And what if and then additionally, let me tell you something else is that the number of people living in absolute poverty, the proportion of the world population living in absolute poverty will be at an all-time low, will have completely collapsed,
mm,
especially after the Second World War, and that the number of people living in starvation or subjected to starvation will be at record low levels, like all-time long arc of human history since we were probably Homo erectus. The number of people living in starvation is absolutely lower now than it's ever been. But somehow, yeah, these myths continue because, like you said, I think if I were to steelman the other argument, if I were to steelman the other side, which I don't agree with, but if I were to like really make their argument for them, and they would say something like, "Why don't we first prioritize dealing with the people we do have?" Right? We have
yeah.
so many people in the earth, and okay, the number of them living in absolute poverty might be lower, but there are still folks who live in absolute poverty. There are still folks who live in poverty. Why don't
Mm,
we focus on lifting them up first before we, I don't know, have another trillionaire who
mm,
invents some sort of LinkedIn SaaS plugin optimization program? Like maybe before we start creating wealth at the other end in this very abstract information economy, why don't we try to solve the concrete problems and challenges today that
mm,
face a lot of people towards the bottom? Which I can
mhm.
sympathize with, right? Like I can see why people might make that argument. They say, why are we introducing more people when we can't even take care of the ones we do have? I get it. I don't agree, but I get it. I think so. That then segues to Crawford's next point, which is that technology is an expression of human nature and not separate from it. And I think this is so interesting, like the framing of this, because many anti-tech people and anti-progress people will draw this dichotomy between what is natural and what is synthetic,
Mm,
between what is man-made and what is the natural order, right? And when
mm,
people say we need to return, they're usually referring to sometime after the agricultural revolution,
mm,
but before the industrial revolution. So it's like, why that time of human progress? So we still have domesticated crops, we still have
mm,
domesticated cattle, but we just don't have the steam engine. Okay. Why that time in particular are people nostalgic for? I don't know. So when people say return to nature, it's a bit strange, but Crawford argues that making tools and changing our world, adapting our environment to ourselves is nature. The spear is nature, right? And even other primates make
mm,
tools, and they're characterized by their ability to make and use tools, and early apes and our early ancestors did exactly this. The plow is in our nature. And the iPhone is in our nature. It's not a departure from humanity. It's an expression of what makes us human. So we're a
mm,
species that doesn't accept things as they are. There's a great quote, and I'll read this and then I want to get your reaction. He says, "The human project is a cumulative one. If not for this ability to build on what came before and to pass on what we have achieved, all of us would still be not even huddling around campfires, since the fire itself was an invention, but shivering naked in the cold as we chewed on raw nuts and seeds or uncooked meat scavenged from other predators." Incredible quote.
yeah. I think that captures it brilliantly. How many people think about that when they talk about returning to the past? Do they really recognize or remember how brutal like times could be without technology? And they are still brutal today, like without our ability, for example, to control the weather, even though people are speak openly about how blasphemous almost it can be to like do cloud seeding or any kind of intervention with the weather at all. That's almost sacred territory, right? It still belongs to the gods. But how much destruction is caused by the weather from mass flooding, droughts, unpredictability of earthquakes, thunderstorms, all this kind of stuff, destroying crops. Why that feels if we had the ability to control it, more wonders could emerge from that. Obviously, there's a bit of a danger. Like, how do you such a complex ecosystem? How do you manage that in such a way to to bring out generally more good than bad, more so than what nature does on its own? it is a really difficult problem to solve. I don't have the answers there, and I guess because we don't have the answers, people will just leave it as it is, don't tamper with it, which is fair enough. But yeah, we should acknowledge that it causes a lot of issues. So yeah, that was one reaction to what you're saying. I don't know exactly what it means by natural. I guess tool use and making tools to control our environment, whether it's the plow, as you mentioned, or anything else, is feels an expression. Yeah, I can see it. It is feels like it's innately human to want to do that, or innately like any animal really, which would have the capabilities that we like chimpanzees do and other animals do as well. They need it's a way for them to harvest and to interact with the environment, and tools just give them leverage. And this makes perfect sense. Like, why wouldn't we want to do that? There's so much backbreaking work. Listen to the podcast today about how people on I don't know, it's factory lines or if on farms who are like bending over all day to pick up crops and harvest them. Is that natural? Do we want people to continue to do that? By the time they're 30 or 40, have like stiff spines or chronic pain? Why wouldn't it seems wrong to deny them of technology that could help them out of that situation? And it doesn't mean that these people should stop interacting with the land. They could still be outdoors, hike, plow on their own in some way or with assistance of technology. So yeah, when I think of examples like that, I think yeah, technology in many ways is marvelous. It gives us a better ability to enjoy nature rather than feel a suffering as a result of nature.
Yep. Yeah, I think we talked about that last podcast episode as well. I referenced the book Lapvona, which
Yeah, you did.
shows life before technology and rule of law and the steam engine and other things. It's like life was very short, and this life of drudgery that antibiotics and robotics and electricity have freed us from is not one that anyone wants to go back to. My grandfather grew up on a farm in rural Quebec, and I think he was quite happy that
Yeah.
his grandson works in an air-conditioned office space, sending emails for 10 hours a day. I think it's like all of these
I,
folks who are supposedly nostalgic for the coal mines,
yeah,
they wouldn't want their children doing that work. So it's
yeah,
a bit strange, like when you really ask
yeah,
the person, what would you want your son or daughter to be doing? They're like, oh yeah, I want them to be in an office space sending emails, of course. I'm like, of course I want them doing that. And
yeah.
then your comments about cloud seeding are really interesting. It reminds me, I was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art yesterday here in New York, and they had a temporary exhibit on ancient Egypt. And
Mhm.
they had all these beautiful, like, carvings and sculptures and senas and just incredible artifacts, which were remarkably well preserved because they were carved in like diorite. It's like stuff that was like from 2500 BCE. It's just hard to fathom how old some of this stuff is. But the interesting thing that I saw is like all of this Egyptian theology was centered around agriculture, right? The Egyptian religion, and when you learn more about like Horus, the sun god, and Osiris is symbolizing rebirth and vegetation, and Isis is symbolizing fertility, and all of these like Egyptian gods and rituals and beliefs, it's this operating system around agriculture. They knew that if the Nile flooded, they would have no crops. And they knew if that the Nile didn't flow enough, then they would have drought and famine. And so there were these cosmic theological beliefs about the grain cycles, and people
Yeah,
worshipped cats, and they worshipped cats, and they thought cats were like this manifestation of God. Because why? Because cats fought away the pests that would eat the grain in grain storage. And so the centers of worship were almost like agricultural bureaus. So it was just
yeah,
it's funny that before playing God meant just doing irrigation properly, and now playing God is, oh, we're doing cloud seeding and taking control of the weather. That, by the
mm,
way, we've messed up through anthropocentric climate change, and now we're trying to correct. And
mm,
people are like, whoa, that's a bridge too far. That's now you're really playing God if you're making
mm.
it rain in the Middle East. That's not okay.
Yeah. No, I think it's natural for us to do that. I think that we have been basically building tools to control our environment for so many years, and that's just like one of the last bastions really to control the weather at that large scale. Yeah, sure. As I said, there will be tension, probably geopolitical tension, a lot of issues that we will have to confront. But I think it's a good thing to be able to learn to do that properly.
Yep. Yep, no, fully agree. Okay. So we say technology is an expression of human nature, not separate from it. Okay, makes sense. And then there's this point which I really like where he talks about like the role of human agency and this rejection of fatalism. So
Mm,
there's a lot of there's this line of argument which basically says that progress is just happening to us, that it's this inevitable force beyond our control, that we are bereft of agency, and it's this progress that is moving us in this direction just happens, right? And Crawford, of course, argues against this. We have genuine agency. We can choose what to build. We can choose what problems to work on. We can choose what future we want to create. And what I
Mm,
love about this is it like in one fell swoop both argues directly against the doomers, which are saying that AI will destroy us inevitably, and
mm,
the accelerationists, which just say that progress is inevitable and we should ride the wave and just help to accelerate it.
mm.
We are not passive observers,
Yeah,
Crawford would argue, right? We are active participants with real
yeah,
choice, and the future
yeah,
is unwritten. And not
yeah.
only is this a more exciting version of events, but I also think it's much more, it puts a lot of onus on us and responsibility on us to create the future that we want to live in and actually think about that. So I wanted to get your reaction there. Like, how much agency do we really have? Or is it just where all the progress we see is just the product of many game theory Punnett squares drawn in a cascading effect, and what we're seeing is just the result of that?
Yeah. So complex, that question, to pull it apart and to discuss like agency. I think part of me believes like to some extent that we individuals don't have as much agency as they'd like. And I say that because many of us in the West are living in capitalist societies. And in order to function well in a capitalism demands progress. If you want to live well, you have to keep progressing almost there. You have to find ways to add value, to contribute value to society in order to be rewarded for it. And there are people that step away from that, but I don't know if many of them live glamorous lives. Yeah. And so, because there's that constant need to continue to find ways to add value, almost it feels like progress at times is inevitable. Society almost enforces that, or the system in which we govern forces that. At the same time, though, I don't believe in like a lack of free will. I mean, yeah, as I say, capitalism is a forced function, but we still are able to make choices, whether we want to continue with capitalism or shift to some other way of society governing our societies, or even within capitalism, like the types of progress that should be rewarded can make choices there. So, yeah, from that point of view, don't believe that we lack agency or agency progress is predetermined. So there's both sides of it. Yeah. So in the middle, cool. I think there's an argument for why certain progress is inevitable, but also that humans and organizations have a choice as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I would go one step further. I would say not only do we have agency at the individual level, which is a whole topic in and of itself, and I think agency can be learned and
Mm,
can even be taught, especially at a young age. It's like certain children in certain households with certain upbringings and certain parental styles and learning from parents see agency and mirror that.
yeah.
And in an age of AI where intelligence might be okay, there's some fluidity to what that even means, but certain types of intelligence will definitely be the domain of machines and the
Yeah.
domain of machine human collaboration. But the one thing that will become perhaps much more high value than it already is agency, is personal agency. Not
Mm,
only do we as individuals have agency, but we as societies have agency. The United States has agency. Google as an organization has agency.
mm,
We as families have agency. We as human tribes and the groups that we organize ourselves into have agency. And I
yeah.
think when we, and it's almost this self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe, you do. If
Yeah.
you believe, you don't. And there's
Yeah.
been
Sure.
studies that have been done on like free will, and when people
Yeah.
don't think they have free will, they tend to misbehave and cheat and behave in all kinds of bad ways. But it's if we believe we have free will and we
Yeah.
believe we have agency, it's remarkable what we can achieve.
Yeah.
And I think the ultimate red pill here is like looking at progress over time. And if you look at, say, for example, progress doesn't happen linearly, it happens in like these huge chasms of no progress or even backwards progress happening. If you look at the European medieval ages, the
Yeah.
number of like notable scholars in Europe in antiquity peaks just before Athens falls to Sparta, and then
Mm,
it dwindles through the Roman Empire and completely has a intellectual dark age
yeah.
during the European medieval times. And then only after the age of science and discovery and like the Renaissance does suddenly that comes surging back, and the number of notable scholars in Europe quintuples over time. And it's a really fascinating thing to think about that progress is not linear and progress is not inevitable, but it's actually we have to make it happen. We have to have the progress is in some ways actually quite fragile. We have to have the right preconditions for project progress to happen at all.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah, I think again we probably talked about this last time about at the governmental level that they instigate progress by rewarding or funding certain types of projects. And that cascades down all the way into smaller organizations, well, big corporations and smaller organizations. Yeah. And agency is an interesting one. I agree that everybody has agency and agency can be learned. It doesn't seem to be that complex idea. Are you able to set a goal for yourself and then do you believe that you can achieve that? And I guess the lack of agency is a lack of belief or that you have autonomy over your life or as an organization. Yeah, I totally agree that agency is accessible to anyone and that we should be educating people and making them aware that they have agency and teaching them the skills in order to like fulfill or live a life that is autonomous.
Yeah. What's that book that you
Mm,
recommended me by Jacob Rees-Mogg's father? The
yeah, individual. Yeah.
Sovereign Individual. And then he basically paints a picture of a world in which a high salary or a relatively high paying role is available to everyone that wills it, essentially. That the economy of tomorrow will reward those of baseline, you have to be smart, but not a genius. And but people who have high agency specifically. If you have high agency, there will be this hyper meritocratic environment that we'll live in tomorrow where regardless of which corner of the world you're in or where you come from or your background or anything, it will reward that. And part of me does believe that, with caveats, of course. But I do think that they're definitely onto something. That's directionally where we're headed, which is something to think about. But okay, so that's interesting. With that, right, Crawford then says, okay, because we can reshape the world, we are responsible for the world that we create. We can't just throw up our hands and say, technology made me do it, or the market made me do it. Every choice about what to build, what to fund, what to pursue, these are moral choices, right? Agency without responsibility is incoherent. So we built this world and we can build a different one.
Mm.
And I think it's so, and that's where he leaves it at the end, which I think is great. So I guess the key question I'd have for you, John, is like, who is we here? Who decides what's responsible and how do we make these choices collectively?
Big. I think doesn't it ties quite closely with what you were previously saying, right? About agency. Decisions are, yeah, the decision funnels through every part of a system from the individual who can decide how he lends his time and efforts and value to certain efforts and which efforts he does that they do. And then also even larger organizations higher up the stack. Yeah, I don't think there is I guess ultimately, who has the final say? How is the future directed? It's on some part maybe the masses, how they're voting, but also those which have the presumably have the resources and the power in order to like sh shape it too. And that could be a smaller collection of people, like we saw recently with the symposium in the Network State Symposium. This is a smaller group of people that have a lot of wealth and resource and connections all over the world. And surely, like the outcomes at that symposium will have generated like new ideas and new thoughts in which people will pursue. And those are not like the masses per se, but those people have enough amongst that collection to really shape the future if they wanted to. Yeah. So change happens for all sorts of reasons, and I guess agency from one person to a million people direct that future, help direct that future as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's an interesting thought experiment to consider like when you look around the Collisons famously, I think they had a really beautiful essay called "The World is a Museum of Passion Projects." And as you look around you at the elevator, at these different machines, and I often see that, like I even ride around here in Queens, New York, and like this, I don't know, water treatment facility and all the pipes and gears and levers and valves that make up the water treatment facility. And you think, okay, I just pass by it and I'm not required to do anything with that facility. I don't play a role there. It's not, I use the water out of my tap and that's it. That's my involvement with that water treatment facility. But some engineer drives past that and thinks, yeah, that's my project. I worked on that. That years of my life were dedicated to putting the pipes in a certain way and configuring the domes in a certain way. And it's if you really think about the built environment that we lived in, how many different people had to think and dream up the conveniences that make modern life possible. And it's those people who are uniquely positioned. And I don't know what percent of the overall population is that? It's like a small percentage, maybe 1 out of 20 people is like in some way involved in either creating or inventing the built environment that make your life comfortable and frictionless. And for those people, they have a unique responsibility, I would argue, and they have agency to create a new environment for us, but they also have a responsibility, a moral obligation to create a brighter tomorrow. With every wave, you'll have the vice merchants, and I get that, and we talked about that, but it's like I don't know. I do think that you should try to respond to a higher calling when building these and inventing new technologies and really thinking about what version of the future are you creating. So,
Yeah, no, I think we all have a responsibility to do that. But it's maintaining that responsibility at the forefront with all the other things that happen in life. Can you afford to distance yourself from distractions and also some of the stresses in order to maintain like front and center this responsibility to, and many can't. And also some people are quite selfish as well. So it's not my problem. We'll leave that to the people that come next to solve. And they're like grossly aware of that. But yeah, I think that's a message that should be like echoing around like every nation and in schools and probably how can you kind of contribute to building a better future for tomorrow?
yeah. Yeah, no, totally agree. I know we talked last time about why doesn't this exist yet. I don't know if you have a few ideas that you want to just throw out there. It's actually a pretty good segment. We can do that one if you like it.
Yeah, let's try. We have one thought top of mind, actually. I think, yeah, what I've been looking into recently is just like neurodegenerative diseases and yeah, just reading a little bit about Alzheimer's and dementia. Yeah, for personal reasons, interested, but also it's one of those things alongside cancer, which everybody is familiar with. They probably know someone in their life that has been impacted by that. And as a species, we've been channeling money, time, and effort into figuring out what's going on, but we still haven't nailed it. So what if, I guess the future tomorrow, like if we can finally get to a point where we can live our lives without the worry of these diseases, or to stay, yeah, to find a way in which we could detect them at an earlier rate. I'm curious, what tools do we need? First of all, what additional information do we need to close the gap between our understanding of the symptoms, how we develop, to then understand like the cause and effects, and maybe what tools do we need to get there to help people researching unearth or discover that information that is going to finally, yeah, finally give us the answers that we're seeking. Yeah, doing a bit of research and reading into that, and hopefully that positive future without having the suffering or having to suffer with those things is near.
Yeah, that's the Alzheimer's question is something I spent a lot of time thinking about, not least in part because my genetics is not incredibly kind to me in terms of the probability that I would get Alzheimer's. I have a slightly increased risk from the baseline. I
Mm.
don't, thank God, have the rare genetic mutation, which is linked to predisposed to early onset Alzheimer's, which I've read about people who have this rare genetic mutation, and it's horrible, and it's almost, do you even want to know that you have that? There, I was reading recently that, and I don't know too much about the biochemistry of it, but basically there was this influential 2006 paper that was published in Nature by a researcher named Sylvain Lesney, and it's the foundation of what's in Alzheimer's research referred to as the amyloid hypothesis. And it was, I think, recently uncovered that it had falsified data and that the images were like doctored. And this scandal like totally shook the field of Alzheimer's research, and decades of research and billions in funding were now called into question because of this, the foundation upon which all of this research rested turned out to be completely fraudulent, right? The paper was supposed to be a smoking gun for the
Mm.
amyloid hypothesis, providing evidence that the buildup of amyloid proteins in the brain is the primary cause of Alzheimer's. And there was hundreds of citations for this paper that directed the course of Alzheimer's research for the better part of a decade. And it was just like revealed in 2022 that this was a complete fabrication.
Wow.
So it's sad, but it dovetails with our discussion earlier. Do those who help create the future have a moral obligation to create it in the right way?
Mm.
I also wonder, not just for the researcher himself, who should, I think, face severe consequences, but also the system of incentives that has been set up in academia that has
Yeah,
people chasing tenure and chasing citations and talks and publicity and the grants that are given out for new and sexy research rather than just confirmatory research and replication studies. Maybe it's not great. Maybe we should really rethink the foundations of how we discover things like this. And it's a huge setback, right? You have promising anti-amyloid treatments that have emerged, such as lecanemab, which is like hugely controversial in and of itself. There's a great book by investigative journalist Charles Pillar on this. It's Alzheimer's is really tough, man. Like neurodegenerative diseases is like the final frontier of discovery in medicine because the brain is a really complex thing that we don't
yeah.
know how it works. I'll stop ranting in a second. There's this anecdote I read about recently called there's a man named Doug Whitney, and he
Just read that.
has yeah, you read about this, right? It's so cool because he has the PSEN2 gene mutation. He's supposed to get Alzheimer's like in
Mm,
his in like it was supposed to be guaranteed before he turned 50. He's now
mm,
75 and he's
mm,
doing great and
mm.
he doesn't have it. And
Yeah,
it's like they don't know why he doesn't have it. And
yeah,
scientists are intensely trying to study why this guy does not have any neurodegenerative cognitive lapse whatsoever. He's doing great. He's sharp as a tack for real. And it's a bright spot in this area of research. And I just realized if we could figure out what is biochemically causing Doug Whitney to not have Alzheimer's, maybe that would be the next breakthrough. So
yeah.
it's really inspiring.
Yeah, but really time. I just read that this afternoon. Yeah, it's funny that you brought this up. But certainly anyway, that's an area that I look to. I think closely related to that is just also like the ability to manipulate, well, to identify and manipulate our genes for a positive future. There's so many things that go wrong as our cells are like reading and writing genes like constantly. And if we're just able to provide a little bit of a helping hand to correct those either from birth or like during the course of one's life. Of course, yeah, I guess it opens tons of other ethical questions like Pandora's box and yeah, controlled births and all this kind of stuff and selection. But I feel like there is a lot of room for good if we're able to continue to develop that technology. Yeah, so I was reading about that. I read about that in relation to allergies as well, how so many people suffer from food allergies, whether it's like peanuts or other sorts of things. And I think actually the top two allergies across, I think it was the United States, I read about shrimps or prawns, and that was one other thing. But it's like crazy that people have to, yeah, in this day and age, have to live with that sort of fear almost that they have to stay away from others, might be handling these kind of things, or continuously be vigilant when they go to restaurants and ask, does it have this, does it have that? If we could correct those things and then take that mental burden away from people, that's such an optimistic future that people should be building towards. So yeah, those are a few more ideas. What if we could live in a world without, yeah, these kind of debilitating issues,
Yeah,
health.
I wonder that in New York City in April, like in the height of pollen season, I was also
Mm.
wondering,
Yeah,
how is this not fixed yet? Like
yeah,
you have AI that can literally make videos of me doing almost anything, but you
mm.
can't fix my pollen sniffles and just me being absolutely miserable and putting in antihistamine drops every 20 minutes for 2 months every spring, and the whole city is having that problem. I'm like,
Yeah.
how is this not solved yet? But yeah, your comments about gene editing are interesting. It has entered the chat. Yeah, sure. Can we find a way to do it in a healthy way? And
Mm.
does it lead us to a future of Gattaca and designer babies? And yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting
But
one. Yeah, I wonder. Yeah, this guy's got his own lab now, apparently in Austin, Texas. So maybe you'll get your answer. Maybe we'll see.
what do you think? I don't know. What's your answer to that question? What if, or what kind of things would you like to see in the future?
Yeah, look, I think, yeah, I'm not sure I'm like super comfortable with like genome editing in humans, to be totally honest. I think there are certain vaccines which could maybe correct better right? Instead of editing your genome, which has unintended consequences, and we haven't even begin to unpack the complexities and the downstream effects of editing one tiny base pair, right? Like this original experiment was like genetically editing two babies modified with HIV resistance, and initially was like praised by the press as a major scientific advancement. And then, of course, very quickly, a lot of bioethicists said we shouldn't do this. There's unintended consequences. We don't know what's going to happen downstream from that. You think you just changed this one base pair, but actually, you might have caused all kinds of havoc. These two girls were born and apparently are healthy, and we don't really know. I think that's really reckless to do that kind of experimentation on humans. I think that we should err on the side of caution for good reason. That said, I think mRNA vaccines could be really promising, right? If you could have vaccines that gave you the proteins that you don't get, or get rid of the proteins that you do get that you don't want, then you can correct a lot of the not so great effects of your genes. And maybe there's a way to have it so they could be administered not so often, and you could correct for all sorts of things from like impaired lipid metabolism like I have, or you could correct it for immune system response to benign pollen as in the case of allergies. I think that's probably better, that direction of having some sort of intervention, pharmaceutical based intervention afterward. It's also more druggable and sellable than doing like genome editing, which is pretty scary.
Yeah. They're all fair points, which are also hard to argue. Once Pandora's box has been
Yeah.
opened, it will be hard to put these things back in.
Yeah.
I think it also ties into a lot of the discussion that we've been having around progress. This is clearly a one vector of progress that we could be making, control over the human body. Yeah, there's a question of why shouldn't we unlock that technology, that branch from the technology tree? Do we consciously say as a species, no, we're not going down there because the consequences of misuse are just too great? And it's the same question that kind of is being asked of AGI. If one scenario that we're envisioning is being completely overrun by a robotic species, why are we still going down this path? So yeah, I guess these are all the questions that we have to tangle with as a people that are interested in progress in technology and as a species as a whole. It's hard. It's hard. Really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's fair. It's food for thought for sure.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
think my contribution for this week's Why Doesn't This Exist Yet is probably a little bit more light and
Yeah.
simple, which is namely that, okay, so I've been complaining about this for a while. Why is there not a to-do list AI agent? Maybe this exists. I have not seen it. I have ADHD, which I've struggled with my entire life. And I have a whole apparatus of calendar invites and reminders and alarms and to-do lists and Google Notes and Google Docs and sending myself WhatsApp messages. Like I have all this patchwork of systems that keeps me organized and functional in today's modern environment. But I do
Mm,
wonder why there is not a simple go-to all-in-one place that sort of integrates with my existing tools that just tells me, oh, hey, Steve, by the way, today you need to register your wife's LLC, or you need to do your taxes, or you need to unclog the drain of your shower, or you need to call your dad and check if he's still landing at LaGuardia on Thursday at 12:40 p.m. Like all of this
mm,
stuff that I lose track of because I'm
yeah,
very distractible. Why
yeah.
does that not exist? I
And
have the tech. There's
it
clearly a market demand for that. There's apps which I've seen, which like there's a few that I've seen which I like, which is like minimalist phone, which reduce distractions and minimize the amount of screen time that you arguably involuntarily are like subjected to because you get sucked
Mhm.
into using an app and scrolling, and then it just distracts you, and then before you know it 2 hours have passed and you
So
can't even account for those 2 hours. So there's
yeah,
apps that do that, which is great, and I've seen that. But there
yeah.
so far I haven't seen a personal productivity app which is just easy to use, has good mind share, has good UX interface, is frictionless in terms of the startup, and has maybe a freemium model. If that exists, I'd pay for it. Maybe it does. I don't know.
Yeah. How do you see what you're describing is different from maybe some of the major providers today, specifically Claude and maybe OpenAI, which can integrate, which you can hook up to like Google Calendar, maybe your email, Gmail at the very least, and a few other things via like MCPs, via servers. how do you played around with those, and you still sense this gap between what you're imagining and what they offer, and what would that be? Like, what is
Yeah.
that?
I haven't used the integration of OpenAI with Google Docs, but what I have, or with Claude and Google Docs, but what I have done is I've used ChatGPT and given it a list of 12 things. It's always a weekend to-do list because it's always the life admin stuff that I lose track of. At work, I use Outlook and I have a to-do list in my Outlook because everything I have to do is somehow tied to an email. So that's fine. So at work, it's okay. But like in my personal life, I will, going into the weekend on Thursday night, for example, I'll write myself a weekend to-do list and I'll give it to, I've done this before where I've given it to ChatGPT. It's okay, remind me of what I need to do. Saturday morning, I wake up. What was my to-do list? And it forgets things or it forgets elements of things that I was supposed to do. And I was like, wasn't I supposed to also do this? And then it will, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you were also supposed to do number six. I forgot to include that. And then
Mm.
you'll tell it, okay, I just did number six. Please tell me what else is left. And then reprioritize it in order of actionability or reprioritize it. My like whatever. Like I'm on the computer now. Give me all the computer-based tasks that I can just knock out quickly because I'm already behind my computer screen. I've already logged into my email. So just please give me everything online that I need to do. It won't frictionlessly reorganize the tasks that you need to do and tell you, oh, you should probably start with this. And it just
Mm.
seems so easy. Like the low-hanging fruit is so obvious.
Yeah,
I'm just surprised that no one's done this.
yeah. I don't know. I feel like you should try them again. I don't know how recently you tried. It does seem very obvious, and it seems like they should be more than capable of doing that. I think where there's like a larger gap is being proactive, and then also, yeah, I guess figuring out, personalizing kind of their responses to you as they learn over time, like what it is that you consider important or not important, and having more context, like where you are. I think in the past you described like an application or software that would know maybe what kind of shops you're walking past and remind you, hey, why don't you pick up those items? I don't know, the sort of food for this evening as you're just passing the grocery now, or something along those lines. That's a little bit harder. That
Yeah.
requires
Yeah. I
permission.
want one that really keeps me accountable though. If I
Mm.
say I'm going to work on my side project on Sunday, I want it to nudge
Yeah,
me like at
yeah,
8:30
we
a.m.
don't have that.
Sunday morning. Hey, you haven't worked on this. I haven't seen you
Yeah,
do one code commit for a week.
for the
Let's
second.
go.
Yeah. Yeah, someone else also mentioned this idea of accountability, and I complained about it recently when I was using this therapy app called Ash, because I think it's also like a super important area for us to focus on, like mental health. Like it's also so damaging to people. And there's a company here that's working on it, and I was interested in applying, so I was using their application to get a better sense of like how it works. And yeah, one of the biggest things that was missing was like the ability to track goals together and to keep you accountable. And that seems to be, again, yeah, a big gap in today's space. The ability to retain information about what you're working on, about your goals, and to give you that guidance that you might need, that structure, or just those prompts even, which again doesn't seem to be too hard. You're right.
I just want push notifications.
Yeah, I guess that's
I mean, yeah,
it.
when you talk about therapy apps, I
Yeah,
generally don't have a positive view of therapy, but I do think CBT is great. And
yeah,
cognitive behavioral therapy, the foundation of that is like everything is your fault. You should take everything in your life, you should take full responsibility for, and it
yeah.
forces you to have agency. And then
Mm,
to give you those nudges, I wake up and I have 12 push notifications for WhatsApp messages from friends sending me memes, Instagram notifications of people sending me also memes, funny videos. I have like
mm,
notifications on X. So all of these things bring me onto a platform that is
mm.
filled with distraction and
Yeah,
addictive behavior. And I don't
yeah.
have one push notification to push me to do something productive and meaningful
Mm,
and useful in my life. Like I
mm.
would pay to have someone leveling the playing field a bit.
Yeah, you just got to take responsibility for your own behavior there. But yeah, no, it's a great point. Someone should be working on it. Maybe we should be working on it.
If someone is working on that, please comment and please comment, leave a comment and let us know because I really want to play with it.
We need to give these things a sense of time first. Anyway, I think in one conversation with Claude the other day, it told me it was Sunday evening, that we'd been talking for 10 minutes, even though it'd been 30 seconds. Yeah, there aren't many AI apps at the moment which give these systems like a time information.
That's true.
Which is
They don't
not,
even know.
again,
Yeah, that's true.
but yeah, they might do it for all sorts of reasons. Maybe it's just, for another time. Issues with the context window and caching and money. But yeah.
Okay. That's great.
All
It's
right.
probably a good place to leave it. I'm going to give you my
Yeah,
full rant on context windows and AI scaling next time then.
sounds good. All right. See you, everyone.
Cool, man. Look, I think we'll wrap there. Look, Crawford's thesis in one sentence: defend humanism against the anti-human sentiment. Technology should serve human flourishing, and we need a positive vision for that, which I think we are both aligned on. Next episode, we're going to be diving into Crawford's episode chapter 4, which is in two parts. So that's going to be a really full episode, which we're excited for. Leave some comments. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and see you next time.